The wind rolled across the plains like a restless spirit, carrying with it the scents of dust, sagebrush, and distant rain. The prairie sky stretched forever, painted in bruised purples and molten reds, the dying sun smoldering over a horizon where hope and despair often mingled as one. It was a land that swallowed the weak, broke the proud, and demanded sacrifices from all who dared to claim it. And yet for those like Anna Whitaker, the widow of a mail-order marriage that had ended in hardship, it was also the only place where she had known freedom. Freedom wrapped in loneliness, yes, but also in the raw, punishing beauty of the West. She stood on her porch that evening, hands tightening around the worn rail, her eyes scanning the dirt road that wound like a scar across the prairie. Something stirred deep in her chest, a feeling she had not let herself taste in years, a sense that the past was not finished with her. She told herself she was only waiting for the cattle to return from the north pasture, or for the hired hand who had taken them there before dusk. But when she caught sight of a lone rider cresting the hill silhouetted by firelight skies, her breath caught. The figure moved with a steadiness, a kind of unhurried certainty, that made her pulse quicken. A man hardened by miles of trail and battle, she thought. Not a stranger, though she prayed he might be. Because something about that silhouette struck her with a cold recognition she wished she could deny. The horse descended, hooves crunching gravel, and soon the rider drew close enough for her to see him clearly. His face was older, cut by shadows and scars. The jawline sharpened, the eyes deeper. Eyes that carried the weight of storms survived. But those eyes were familiar. Too familiar. They belonged to the boy she once knew. No, the boy she once held years ago, when the world had not yet taken everything from them both. "Good evening, Anna," he said, voice low, touched with a roughness that spoke of whiskey, dust, and grief. Her lips parted, but no sound escaped. Her heart twisted painfully against her ribs. She wanted to turn away, to deny the truth, but she could not. It was Samuel, the orphan she had cared for when she was only 16, the boy who had once clung to her skirts after his mother died, the child who had vanished with a traveling wagon train, leaving her with nothing but a broken memory. And now here he was, no longer a child, but a man she should not even recognize, much less welcome. "Samuel," she whispered, though the name felt dangerous on her tongue. Dangerous because he had changed beyond recognition, and yet not enough. She could still see traces of the boy in his smile, even though it was strained, haunted. His gaze lingered on her, as if drinking in the sight of her face, her hair touched by evening light, the lines of hardship that had not stolen her beauty but had deepened it. And then he looked away almost in shame. "I reckon it's been near 15 years. 15, she repeated faintly, her mind spinning. Her husband had been alive then. Her son had not yet been born nor lost. Her whole life was different. Samuel had been just a boy clinging to her hand in the churchyard, his tears wet against her shoulder. She had whispered promises to keep him safe, to shield him, but life had scattered him like so much prairie dust, and now he had returned with the weight of a man and the eyes of someone who had walked through hell. The silence stretched too long. A coyote howled from the far ridge and the wind rattled the shutters. Finally, Anna forced herself to speak. "You shouldn't be here." The words came harsh, harsher than she intended, for she could feel the fragile tremor beneath them. "This is forbidden. Samuel, you must know that." A shadow flickered across his face, part pain, part defiance. He dismounted, boots striking the ground with heavy thuds. He walked toward the porch slowly, carefully, like a man approaching a grave or a shrine. His hat dipped low over his brow, his voice steady but edged. "Maybe it is. Maybe everything about me is wrong now. But I had to see you, Anna. I had to come back, because you're the only thing left that feels true." Her hands trembled, and she hid them against her apron. She should order him away. He was a grown man now, no longer the child she remembered. And the sight of him awakened something she had no right to feel. But she could not speak, could not breathe. She saw his scars, his weathered skin, his restless strength, and she knew with a deep and terrifying certainty that her life had just been rewritten by his return. As the night settled in, the lantern on her porch flickered, casting their shadows together on the wall. Neither moved, caught between memory and desire, between what was allowed and what was forbidden, and somewhere beyond the silence, the thunder of distant hooves echoed, a reminder that danger and destiny were already riding toward them. Whispers in the dust. The following morning dawned gray and brittle, The kind of morning that made the world seem tired before it even began. The prairie stretched wide and barren beneath a sky the color of ashes, a wind carrying dust in restless spirals. Anna awoke before the rooster crowed as she always did, though her sleep had been broken, haunted by the memory of Samuel's voice. She had not dreamed of him in years, not since the days when she prayed he might be alive somewhere, though her prayers eventually fell silent. Yet now, with his sudden return, her mind burned with questions she dared not ask. Who had he become in those long years? What paths had carved the sharpness into his face, the scar along his jaw, the weight in his shoulders? And why had he chosen to come back to her now after everything? She moved about her kitchen in silence, her hands busy with bread dough, her mind elsewhere. She remembered the first night she had fed him as a boy, when he was no more than 12, skin and bone after the fever took his mother. She had broken her own loaf of cornbread in half to share with him, her heart aching at the sight of his hollow eyes. That boy had clung to her like she was the last safe place in the world. And now the man who stood on her porch the night before seemed both familiar and utterly foreign, as if time had reshaped him into someone dangerous. She whispered to herself as if to chase away the memory. This is forbidden. This is wrong. But her heart did not obey her voice. By mid-morning, the chores carried her outside. The frost had burned away, leaving the fields dry and brittle. Her small herd of cattle grazed at the far edge of the pasture, ribs showing thinly from the drought that had stolen the grass. She adjusted the fence post herself, the leather of her gloves creaking, every motion a reminder of the labor her husband once bore before death left it to her alone. There was no one else, no kin, no son, no husband, just her. Until now, the sound of hoofbeats behind her made her freeze. She turned slowly, half afraid it was Samuel again, though part of her heart leapt at the thought. But it was not him. It was Sheriff Calder, a stern man in his 50s with iron-gray hair and a voice like gravel. He reined in his horse at her fence line, his eyes sweeping the land as though it belonged to him. "Mornin', Anna," he said. "Heard a stranger rode into your place last night." Her pulse quickened, but she kept her expression calm. "Many strangers pass through, Sheriff. Most are just looking for food or water." He studied her a long moment, his gaze sharp. This one didn't look like the passing kind. "Folks in town say he came in from the North Ridge. Could be trouble." Anna's chest tightened. Already Samuel's presence was stirring suspicion. "I didn't catch his name," she lied too quickly. "He asked for water and I gave him some. Then he left." The sheriff narrowed his eyes but let the matter rest for the moment. "Well, keep your door barred just the same. A gang's been stirring up dust west of here. Ranchers losing stock, wagons raided. Rumor is, one of their old riders slipped away. If that stranger comes back, you let me know." He tipped his hat and rode off, leaving Anna trembling against the fence rail. A gang, an outlaw rider. Could it be? No. She pushed the thought aside. Samuel could not be one of them. He could not be tied to blood and lawlessness, and yet, the scar on his jaw, the weight in his voice, the shadow in his eyes. She feared the truth before she even knew it. That evening, when the sky blazed gold over the horizon, Samuel returned. He did not ride straight up to the house this time, but lingered by the cottonwood near the creek, waiting for her. Against her better judgment, she went to him. "Why are you here?" she demanded softly, clutching her shawl tight against the wind. The sheriff already asked questions. "You'll bring nothing but trouble." Samuel leaned against the tree, his hat pulled low, his voice steady but threaded with something raw. "Trouble finds me whether I look for it or not. But I came because I owed you the truth. You were the only one who ever cared if I lived or died, Anna. I couldn't stay away." Her throat tightened and she shook her head fiercely. "You're not the boy I knew. I can't." He stepped closer. Close enough she could see the lines of exhaustion carved deep into his face. His eyes, those same blue eyes she remembered from the churchyard, were fierce now, wounded but burning with something undeniable. "No, I'm not the boy. I haven't been that boy for a long time. I've done things I can't take back, things that'll follow me until I'm in the ground. But I swear to you, Anna, I came back not to hurt you, but because you're the only piece of my past that feels clean." The words cut through her defenses like a blade. And for one terrifying moment she let herself see him not as the sheriff's fugitive, not as the outlaw rumored in whispers, but as the boy who once held her hand in grief. And in that moment something forbidden and unshakable stirred between them. Before either could speak again, a shot cracked across the valley. Then another. The cattle at the far edge of her pasture scattered, lowing in terror. Anna's heart lurched as she looked toward the ridge and saw riders, dark shapes against the blazing. Sunset charging down toward her land. Outlaws. Samuel's hand went to the revolver at his hip with the ease of a man far too practiced. Anna gasped, torn between fear and recognition. For the first time, she saw him for what he truly was. Not just a lost boy returned, but a man tied to violence, a man who carried danger wherever he rode. And yet, as the gang descended, it was Samuel who stepped forward to shield her, his voice rough with command. Get inside, Anna. Lock the door. Don't look back. Her feet refused to move. Her heart hammered with terror and something darker still, for she knew in her bones that whatever was about to happen on her land would bind their fates together forever. Sins of the past gunfire still echoed in Anna's ears, long after the riders had vanished into the valley. Smoke hung low over the pasture, mingling with the dust kicked up by hooves and the metallic sting of spent bullets. The cattle had scattered into the ravine, several lying dead in the trampled grass, and the fence line was shattered. She stood on the porch with her shawl clutched tight, breath shallow, eyes wide, unable to move. Samuel stood in the yard, his revolver still in hand, the barrel smoking faintly in the fading light. His face was stone, unreadable, but his chest rose and fell hard with the rhythm of violence freshly spent. He had fought like a man who had seen battle too many times, quick, merciless, unhesitating. Two of the raiders lay motionless near the creek, and Anna could not tear her eyes away from them. Blood seeped into the earth, red against the dry grass, soaking into the land she had worked so hard to keep alive. Her stomach churned. She wanted to scream, to demand why he carried death so easily, but her throat was dry. The boy she remembered, the one who once cried into her arms, was gone. In his place stood a man who seemed born from gunsmoke and outlaw fire. She whispered at last, barely audible, "Who are you, Samuel?" He holstered his gun slowly, his eyes meeting hers. In them was something desperate, almost pleading, but beneath it all, something darker. "Not the boy you remember," he said simply. "The sheriff came at dawn. Sheriff Calder, riding hard with two deputies drawn by the gunfire." He surveyed the yard grimly. The broken fence, the blood, the bodies covered by tarp Samuel had laid. His eyes lingered on Samuel longer than was comfortable. "Seems trouble found its way here after all," Calder muttered. "And you're not from around these parts, are you?" Samuel's hand brushed the brim of his hat, but his gaze never dropped. "Just passing through," he said. His voice was calm, but Anna heard the lie in it. The sheriff seemed to hear it too. Later, when the deputies carted the bodies off toward town, the sheriff drew Anna aside, his hand heavy on her arm. "That man's dangerous," he warned. "I've seen the way he holds a gun. Too steady, too fast. Men don't learn that honest. Mark my words, Anna, he's hiding something. If you care for your land or your life, you'll keep him far from both." Anna nodded stiffly, but her mind was a storm. Samuel's presence had saved her. Without him, she might be dead or worse. And yet the sheriff was right. His hands were too sure, his eyes too sharp. He was not a drifter. He was something else, something bound to blood and violence. That night, Samuel came to her door. He did not ask permission to enter. He simply stood there in the shadows, his face hard but his eyes unguarded. "I won't lie to you, Anna," he said, voice low. "What the sheriff suspects, it's true. I rode with a gang once, years back. I was just a boy then, but I learned things no boy should. They took me in when I had nothing. And when you ride with men like that, you either learn to kill or you don't last." Anna's knees weakened and she gripped the table to steady herself. "You were one of them?" He looked away, shame etching deep into his features. "I was not proud of it. I left them, Anna, years ago. I've been running since, but you can't outrun blood on your hands." He paused, his voice breaking for the first time. "I came back here because this is the only place that ever felt like home. The only place I wasn't just another stray dog with a gun. I thought, maybe if I could see you again, I'd remember what it was to be human." Her heart ached at his confession, torn between horror and the faint, stubborn tenderness she had carried for him across years. She remembered the boy's small hand clutching hers in the churchyard. She remembered his laughter, the way he used to call her sister, though she was no kin. That boy was still in him somewhere, wasn't he? Or was she fooling herself? "Samuel?" she whispered, the words trembling. "If the sheriff finds out, he'll hang you. And if the gang knows where you are, they already know." Samuel interrupted grimly. "Those riders weren't strangers. They were sent to fetch me back, to remind me no one leaves without paying a price." Her breath caught. "So it's true. You brought this danger to my land." He flinched as if struck. I never meant to. I never wanted to drag you into this. But I swear on my life, Anna, I'd die before I let them touch you. The words sent a chill through her, for they were both a promise and a curse. If he stayed, death would come for them both. If he left, she feared her heart would go with him. That night, as the wind moaned through the prairie grass, Anna sat by her window, unable to sleep. In the distance, Samuel sat by the dying embers of a campfire, his silhouette bowed, alone with his sins. She pressed her hand against the glass, whispering words no one could hear. This is forbidden, but I can't turn away. And when dawn came, so did the riders. Dark shapes on the horizon, too many to count, their dust cloud rising like a storm. Samuel rose slowly to his feet, his revolver already in his hand. He looked toward the house, toward Anna's window, and for a fleeting moment she saw the boy again in his eyes. Then he turned, facing the past that had finally caught up with him, the forbidden vow. The storm broke at twilight, not of thunder or rain, but of men on horseback. The outlaws came down from the ridge like wolves, their shadows stretched long against the burning sky. Dust rose beneath their hooves in choking clouds, the ground trembling with their charge. Anna watched from the porch, her hands gripping the rail so tightly her knuckles burned white, her heart battering against her ribs. She had prayed the night before that Samuel's confession was only words, the regret of a restless drifter haunted by his past. But now she saw the truth painted in dust and steel. The past had not only found him, it had come to drag him back into hell. Samuel stood in the yard, a lone figure against the tide. His revolver gleamed faintly in the dim light, his stance wide, sure, defiant. There was no fear in him, though Anna could see the tension in his jaw, the weariness in his shoulders. He looked for a moment like a man carved from stone, but she knew he was flesh and blood, breakable, and every beat of her heart screamed at the risk he bore for her sake. The outlaws reined in, their laughter sharp and cruel echoing across the valley. Their leader, a scar-faced brute named Harmon Keene, spat into the dirt and let his eyes rest on Samuel. Never thought I'd see the pup standing tall again, he drawled. You've run long enough. Time to come home, boy. Samuel's voice cut through the dust like a blade. I ain't your boy anymore, Keene. You know that. Keene chuckled, but it was the kind of laughter that carried no mirth. You don't just walk away. You owe blood. You owe loyalty. And if you won't come back willing, well, maybe this fine lady here'll give you reason to. His gaze slid to Anna, and the sight of it made her stomach turn to ice. Before she could retreat, Samuel stepped forward, placing himself squarely between her and Keene's men. She's not part of this. Leave her be. Everything's part of this, Keene sneered. You made it so when you ran. Now you'll pay. The standoff cracked like a whip. Gunfire split the evening. The outlaws firing wild into the air, into the fences, into the earth itself to scatter cattle and send terror screaming through the valley. Samuel moved with a precision that made Anna's breath seize, quick draw, steady aim, each shot deliberate. He cut down one rider, then another, but for every man that fell, two more pressed forward. Anna scrambled back inside, bolting the door, trembling in the dim light of her lantern, her mind a whirlwind of fear and desperate prayer. When silence finally fell, it was heavy and raw. Anna crept back to the porch, her breath shallow, and saw Samuel kneeling in the dirt, his hand pressed against a bleeding wound in his side. The outlaws had retreated for now, their shouts fading into the dark, but they would return. She knew it. They were not finished. She hurried to him, dropping to her knees at his side, her hands frantic as she pulled a cloth from her apron to press against the wound. You're hurt. God, Samuel, you'll bleed out. His hand caught hers, rough but steady, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her tremble. Listen to me, Anna, he rasped. They'll come back. They won't stop until one of us is in the ground. I need you to understand. If I stay, your life ain't safe. But if I go, they'll hunt me till I'm dead. There's no peace left for me except maybe here. Her throat burned and tears welled despite her fight against them. You can't stay. The sheriff will hang you if he learns the truth. And if the gang takes you, I don't care about the law or Keene or the rope, Samuel cut in, his voice raw, unguarded. I care about this place. About you. I came back because I couldn't keep running. I thought maybe if I saw you again, if I stood on this land again, I'd remember what it was to be more than a gun hand. And I have. Anna shook her head, torn between fury and longing. This is forbidden, Samuel. Don't you see? The things you've done, the blood you carry, it can never be washed clean." His eyes softened then, the hardness slipping for just a moment, revealing the boy beneath the scars. "Maybe not. But if there's any hope left in me, Anna, it's because of you. You're the only vow I ever wanted to keep." Her breath caught, her body trembling under the weight of his words. She wanted to push him away, to scream at him for bringing danger to her doorstep, for stirring feelings she had buried beneath years of survival and grief. But she could not. His confession unraveled her resolve, and in the dim glow of twilight, she felt herself surrendered to the truth she had fought so hard to deny. She pressed her forehead to his, her tears falling against his cheek. "Then swear it," she whispered. "Swear you'll never go back to them. Swear you'll never leave me to face this alone." His hand cupped hers, his blood staining her skin, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "I swear it, Anna. By God and by this land I swear, I'll never leave you again." For one fragile heartbeat the world held still. The vow hung between them like a lifeline, binding them in love and peril both. But as the wind howled through the valley, carrying with it the distant echo of hoofbeats, Anna knew the vow would be tested in fire and blood and redemption. The vow Samuel made that night clung to Anna's heart like a brand, burning, searing, impossible to forget. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in something fragile and impossible, that love might still bloom in a land of dust and ruin. Yet even as the words left his lips, Anna knew the West would not allow such vows to stand untested. Out here, promises were weighed not by sentiment but by survival. The next days passed like a waking dream, each hour stretched taut with both tenderness and dread. Samuel stayed close to the homestead, mending fence posts with his good hand despite the wound at his side. His body stooped in pain but his will unbroken. Anna watched him from the kitchen window, torn between admiration and fear. She should have been grateful for his strength, for the way he took to protecting her land as if it were his own. But every glance reminded her of the danger stitched into his skin, the outlaw past that shadowed him like a wolf waiting for its chance to strike. Word traveled quickly in the frontier. By the third day, whispers reached town that Harmon Keene's gang had suffered losses near Anna's ranch. The sheriff himself rode out, suspicion sharpened into accusation. Calder's boots struck her porch like hammer blows as he demanded answers. "Anna," he said, eyes narrowing. "Folks talk. They say that stranger of yours fought off 6 men alone. Now I've known ranchers who could shoot, but I've never seen one drive back Keene's riders and live to tell of it. So I'll ask again, plain, who is he?" Anna held herself steady, though her voice shook. "He's a man who saved my life. That's all you need to know." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Then hear me clear. If he's the man I think he is, his hands are bloodier than you want to admit. I'll not see this town bled dry by one man's past. You tell him to turn himself in or I'll drag him myself." When Calder left, Anna found Samuel at the creek, washing blood from his shirt. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, his face shadowed by the weight of what he had overheard. "The law's coming for me," he said, voice low, "and the gang's not far behind. Seems both sides want me dead, Anna. I reckon I've run out of places to hide." Her chest ached, torn between two truths. The sheriff was right, and so was Samuel. She wanted to save him, but to do so meant defying not only the law but her own conscience. He had killed men who had families, perhaps men whose sins could not erase their humanity. Yet when she looked at him, when she saw the flicker of the boy he once was, her heart betrayed her. That night, Samuel confessed fully. By the fire, with the wind rattling the shutters, he told her everything. The robberies, the raids, the blood spilled on his hands. He spoke without flinching, his words raw, torn from the depths of shame. "I've done things no man should. Things I can't ever wash away. But the worst sin I ever carried was leaving you behind. Because you were the only thing that made me believe I wasn't just another killer." Anna listened, tears burning in her eyes. His truth was a blade, cutting deep, but it was also a balm. For in his confession she saw not only the outlaw but the man desperate to be redeemed. And in the silence after his words she reached for his hand, trembling. "Then let this be your redemption, Samuel. Not the gun, not the blood. Stay, fight for this land, for me. Prove to yourself there's something worth saving." The chance came sooner than either expected. At dawn the sound of hooves thundered once more. This time it was not half a dozen men but near 20. Keen had returned furious, bringing the full weight of his gang. The sky was heavy with storm clouds, the earth quaking beneath their charge. Samuel stepped outside with his rifle slung over his shoulder, his face grim but resolute. "They won't stop, Anna," he said. "Not until I'm dead. But I'll see to it they never touch you." Anna's heart screamed in protest. "You can't face them alone." "I'm not alone," he interrupted, his eyes locking with hers, fierce and unyielding. Not anymore. The battle that followed tore the valley apart. Gunfire roared, echoing off the ridges, smoke rising like a funeral pyre. Samuel fought with the ferocity of a man who had nothing left to lose, his rifle singing, his revolver flashing, each shot precise, deadly. The gang pressed hard, circling, flanking, determined to drag him down. Anna, driven by desperation, fired from the porch, her hands shaking but her aim true enough to drive back a rider from the doorway. Hours passed in minutes, minutes stretched into lifetimes. Blood stained the earth, horses screamed, men fell. The smell of gunpowder clung to the air, acrid, suffocating, and through it all, Samuel did not falter. He stood like a wall between Anna and the men who sought to destroy her, his body battered but unbroken. At last, as the storm clouds burst and rain poured down, Harmon Keen himself rode forward, his eyes burning with hate. He dismounted, drawing his revolver, and faced Samuel in the mud. "You should have stayed gone," Keen snarled. "We could have made you king of the border. Instead, you chose her, a widow with a dying farm." Samuel's jaw clenched, his chest heaving. "She's worth more than every outlaw crown you ever dreamed of." The guns fired almost as one. The sound split the storm, thunder answering in kind. Both men staggered, both struck. Keen fell first, his body crumpling into the mud. Samuel stood a heartbeat longer, blood blooming across his chest, his revolver slipping from his hand. Then he fell to his knees, gasping, rain washing crimson rivers down his shirt. Anna screamed his name, rushing through the storm, collapsing beside him in the mud. His eyes fluttered, but when they met hers, they were clear, filled not with regret but with peace. "I told you," he whispered, his voice faint but steady. "I'd never leave you again." Her tears fell hot against his skin as she cradled him, the rain soaking them both. Around them lay silence, the gang scattered, broken, their leader dead. The storm raged on, but the battle was over. And in that moment, Anna knew Samuel had bought not only her survival, but his own redemption, sealed in blood and sacrifice. When the dust settles, the storm passed, but the land bore its scars. Rainwater pooled in the furrows carved by hooves and bullets, the earth soaked with blood and mud alike. The fence line was shattered, the herd scattered, and silence hung over the valley like a funeral shroud. Anna knelt in that silence, cradling Samuel against her chest, her shawl soaked through with rain and blood, her heart hammering in terror of the stillness in his body. His breath came ragged, shallow, but it was there, stubborn and defiant. She pressed her hand against his wound, whispering his name as though it alone could bind him to the earth. "Don't you leave me, Samuel. Don't you dare." Her tears mingled with the rain, falling to his face, to the ground, as though the heavens themselves grieved with her. She had spent so many years alone, surviving one loss after another. The death of her husband, the grave of her child, the endless grind of the frontier. She could not bear to lose him too, not now. Not after he had become both her greatest fear and her only salvation. Through the haze of pain, Samuel stirred, his eyes flickering open. He tried to smile, though it came weak and broken. "Still here," he whispered, his voice rasping like dry leaves. "Told you I wouldn't leave." Anna sobbed, pressing her forehead to his. "You're a fool. You've ruined me. I should have let the law take you, but I can't. I won't." The days that followed blurred into one long struggle for survival. Anna worked with hands steadier than her heart to clean and stitch Samuel's wound, using every scrap of cloth, every tincture of herb she had. She fed him broth by candlelight, sat at his bedside when fever gripped him, whispered prayers when his breath grew faint. Outside, the land groaned with ruin, the barn roof sagging from storm, the cattle wandering half wild. But she cared nothing for it. All that mattered was the man fighting for life beneath her roof. Word spread quickly of the battle. The townsfolk whispered of the widow Whitaker's ranch, where a dozen outlaws had fallen and their leader slain. Some called it providence, others called it curse. The sheriff came again, this time with no deputies at his back, but with the full weight of the law in his gaze. He stood in her doorway, hat in hand, his eyes flicking to the wounded man in her bed. He belongs in a cell, Anna, Calder said, his voice low, almost sorrowful. There's no redemption for men like him. You know that. Anna rose to her feet, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. You're wrong. Redemption doesn't come from gallows or iron bars. It comes from choice, from sacrifice. And he's made his choice. He's given everything to protect this land, to protect me. If the law can't see that, then the law is blind. The sheriff studied her a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. At last he sighed, tipping his hat. You've always been stubborn, Anna. Maybe stubborn enough to save him. But know this, the town won't forget what he's done, and neither will I. With that he left, his boots striking the porch like a verdict not yet spoken. Samuel healed slowly, painfully, but with each day, color returned to his face, strength to his frame. He walked the porch again by the third week, leaning on Anna's arm, the sunrise spilling gold across the plains. The land was scarred, the fences broken, but the storm had passed, and in its wake something fragile yet unbreakable had taken root between them. One evening, as the sky flamed crimson and the prairie wind sighed through the cottonwoods, Samuel took Anna's hands in his. His voice was low, steady, filled with a reverence she had never heard in him before. Anna, I can't promise the world will forgive me. I can't promise the past won't follow us, but I can promise this, I'll stand by you whatever comes. If you'll have me, I'll make this land, this home, our new beginning. Her throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. She thought of the vow he had made in blood and storm, the promise he had carved with his very life. She thought of the boy she once knew, the outlaw he had become, and the man who now stood before her, scarred, broken, but redeemed by love. She whispered as she had that first night, though the words carried a different weight now. This is forbidden. Her voice trembled, but she smiled through her tears. And yet it's the only thing I've ever truly wanted. Samuel's rough hands cupped her face, and in the hush of the dying light he kissed her, a kiss that carried every sorrow, every redemption, every vow reborn. For the first time in years, Anna felt whole, as though the West itself had yielded not only its hardship but its grace. The dust would settle. The land would heal, and in that quiet space between survival and hope, love, once forbidden, now sanctified, took root in the heart of the frontier.